Hi, Trevor here, reflecting on life through music. Welcome and thank you for stopping by. It is wonderful that you are here. Well, I trust you enjoyed my mini series on Bob Dylan when we looked at the incredible influence he has had on the music industry with his incredible poetic, lyrical, and thought provoking lyrics. So I trust you enjoyed that one. Well, we're going to a guy today who Bob Dylan himself said influenced him. This guy, certainly in the 1930s, is considered the world's greatest entertainer. And because of that, we need to give this guy a couple of videos. And the guy we're talking about is Al Jolson. Now, I was first introduced to Al Jolson through my dad. Now, Al Jolson had a very distinctive style about him, and I'll get onto that in a little minute. But my dad loved miming Al Jolson, in particular his song "Mammy, My Mammy." And I remember Dad getting on stage and doing the whole Al Jolson thing. So I've got some very fond memories of Al Jolson indeed. So yeah, we need to give him a couple of videos. We'll look at just in generally today, and then next time we'll look a little bit more at what other people have said about him. So I just need to put the glasses on because I need to read my notes, because there's a few notes here because of the significance of this guy. So he was born in 1886, and although born in Lithuania, he very much found his mark in America, in the US, in Broadway in particular. His career lasted from 1911 to 1950, and as I've said, he has been called the world's greatest entertainer. He certainly was at the time. Now, I'll show you a clip of him in a minute, but you can see what I mean. This guy is a compelling, all-encompassing performer. His singing style, he had an incredible range to his voice. He also was an compulsive whistler. Singing style has been said to be sentimental and melodramatic. He kind of really tells stories with his music, and he just moves the whole time. And it was this style that made his songs popular. People just had to see him because of what he was like. He gave audiences what they wanted. He was constantly looking for ways to make his performances better. He was constantly looking for ways of what his audience absolutely wanted, and he was willing to give everything, absolutely everything, to his audience. In fact, one of his things that he created was building a runway from the stage to go out to his audiences. Now, back when Al Jolson started, you were very much on the stage, and he's the one who said, hang on a minute, can we actually go out into the audience a little bit? Because, people want to see me because they're here to see me, right? That was just the way that he was. And so can we get a runway to go out from the stage? And I said, yeah, we can do that. No worries. A catalogue of around 50 songs. I suppose Jolson, he would do one or two songs from time to time. He didn't need that many songs, but his songs such as You Made Me Love You, My Mammy, Toot Toot Tootsie, Rockabye Your Baby, I'm Sitting on Top of the World, Ragging My Baby to Sleep, that sold 1 million copies. And between 1946 to 1951, I suppose when the whole concept of records came in, he released 8 albums. Obviously, one being 1951, so that was after he died, so very much an immemorial album. Jolson has influenced many famous singers that came after him, people such as Bing Crosby, now of course sang White Christmas, Julie Garland, rock and roll entertainer Jerry Lee Lewis, and as I said before, Bob Dylan. Now, it was Dylan who famously said Jolson's life was someone whose life I can feel. Because the issue that we had with Al Jolson was that because he was so obsessed with performing, it created issues with his personal life. But when he balanced performing to personal. It was always the performing that won out. He was America's highest paid entertainer in the 1930s. So that just goes to show that because obviously in the 1930s it was also when the Great Depression hit America, and so Jolson was very much involved in keeping the motivation and psyche of American people a little bit more positive. But very highly paid entertainer in 1930. And through his life, he was involved in 13 stage productions, mainly on Broadway. Now, in 1927, it was a significant time for the movie industry, because before that we had silent pictures. Now, people like Charlie Chaplin was able to create stories on stage without using their voices. Well, in 1927, someone decided that perhaps we could get talking into movies. And certainly the first full-length talking movie was The Jazz Singer, and Al Jolson was the jazz singer. Now, you may remember a few years later, Neil Diamond starred in a remake of The Jazz Singer. And I don't know if you remember the movie Singing in the Rain that had Gene Kelly in it. That was very much another studio's response to the fact that The Jazz Singer had come out. And how do we get this talking thing to work? And where do we put the microphones? And how do we make it look sensible? And what about syncing the voice to the words and everything else? So The Jazz Singer was a significant movie in the world of movies, and Al Jolson was the guy that brought that music to life. Of course, with such a compelling voice that he has, he was a perfect choice for that particular movie. In fact, he starred in many other musical movies in the 1930s, and throughout his life he starred or featured in around 31 movies. In fact, a movie about Jolson's life, now you don't get a movie made about you unless you are a significant player in the world, and the Jolson story won Oscars in 1946. An actor called Larry Parks played Jolson, but Jolson sang all the songs behind the scenes. And in 1949, a sequel, Jolson Sings Again, was released, and that was nominated for 3 Oscars. Now, if you haven't seen the Jolson story and you are a little bit interested, it's really worth a look, because here we see the tension that Jolson had between what was his incredible, amazing talent, the fact that he needed to actually perform all the time, because after concerts there was always the parties that you performed at as well. The tension between that and the fact that he also had a personal life, and which one was going to win out. And so it's quite an intriguing story about this. You can see what it's like behind the scenes for someone who was the most successful guy on the planet, pretty much, when he was in his heyday. And then World War II came along, and after the attack on Pearl Harbor, which obviously rocked the Americans in so many ways, he was the first star to entertain troops in World War II. Now, obviously, in the late 1930s, Jolson's career was starting to wane a little bit, and so for him to perform to World War II really bolstered his I suppose, his credos again. And then again in 1950, he became the first star to perform for GIs in Korea, the Korean War. Of course, Korean War is where the MASH series was set. It's one of the hospitals in Korea. In fact, it is said that he did 42 shows in 16 days. Korea very much, because I said he actually died in 1950, and so it was actually those trips to Korea that pretty well did him in. And I think he just needed to perform at all costs, even in Korea. 42 shows in 16 days is quite amazing. Now, we're talking about a bygone era here. One of the things that Jolson was famous for was performing in blackface makeup. Now, in this day and age, that probably wouldn't be something that would be appropriate anymore. I think you know, it's all a bit of a trick with this stuff. But certainly, we had the Black and White Minstrel Show. That was a show that was around. We also had, and this was kind of a theatrical convention in the mid 19th century. I think for Jolson in particular, he had a real affinity with the African American performers. He wasn't being disrespectful to them. I think what he was trying to do, if anything, was to try and bridge the gap that existed between um, African Americans and white Americans. He was doing everything he could to try and bring African Americans more into the American psyche. And I suppose because he had the voice that he had, he thought, well, I can try and do that somehow. So, so probably, obviously, in this day and age, it's probably not something that would be appropriate now, but certainly back then, it was just part of the deal. Um, and as I said, he did that not because he was trying to make a joke. He was trying to bridge the gap that existed in America at the time, because he had a very unique and dynamic style, and he liked the way African Americans sang. He liked their jazz and blues influences. And he was pretty much later credited with single-handedly introducing African American music to the white audiences. He loved the theatrical nuances and artistic, energetic stylings of African Americans. It was quite compelling to him. So, very much influenced his style as he entertained the American public. In fact, as early as 1911, so right back when his career started, he became known for fighting against anti-black discrimination on Broadway. Obviously, he didn't get a go, perhaps. But his well-known theatrics and promotional quality on Broadway helped pave the way for many African American performers and playwrights and songwriters, including the legendary Cab Calloway, who of course was in the Blues Brothers, Louis Armstrong, What a Beautiful World, Duke Ellington, just the incredible band leader he was, Fats Waller, and Ethel Waters. And I probably think there's probably many others that he has influenced as well, but there are some very significant names amongst that community. So, Al Jolson, one of a kind. There will never be anyone else quite like him ever again. This was an era where performers were characters. Performers were characters to bring their audience for an all-encompassing musical experience. This was an era where performers did everything they possibly could to give their audiences a great time. Al Jolson took this to the absolute maximum degree. He was always looking for ways to make himself even more compelling to his audiences. His audiences were everything to him, sometimes at the expense of his personal life. And if you watch the Jolson story, you'll certainly see some of those tensions when he tried to retire for a while. Obviously, when you are the highest paid performer in the 1930s, where there was a bit of money there to not potentially need to work, but Jolson needed to work. And even reinventing himself to not just in World War II, but also the Korean War. He was also a guy that tried to give back when he could. And as I'll get on tomorrow, I'm going to list a whole heap of people and what they actually say about Al Jolson, and from some of the most unusual and unexpected places as well. So Al Jolson, 1930s, it was a moment in time that he absolutely capitalized on him. He loved music. He loved it. He loved performing. He knew who he was. And I think the challenge for us today is that, that sometimes it's the unique people, the ones that are so different, that become successful. And I think in this day and age of us all having to be cool and a little bit measured and a bit constricted in some ways, just to try and fit in. To have someone who is just so over the top in the way he's performed is a bit of a challenge to us, I'm thinking. Because he knew who he was. He knew who he was. He knew what made him tick. He knew what made him so compelling, and he knew the audience needed him and wanted him. There is certainly a challenge for us today, even in our own small parts of the world, to actually be unique and to be original and to be ourselves. Because when you are yourself, you know, you can be free to be yourself. You find yourself absolutely flying through life. That's indeed. Well, there's one clip today that I thought I'd show of our Jolson. Now, I have stayed away from the blackface image that he had, even though it was quite a compelling one at the time, just for sensitivity, I'm thinking. And so there's a song of his, Toot Toot Tootsie Goodbye, and here you'll see all the elements that make Al Jolson such a compelling performer, the way he moves, his incredible singing voice. Let's not underestimate his incredible singing voice, but it's not just his tone, it's the way he delivers his voice. He almost talks at times. Sometimes he's singing really, really fast. He can hold on to the long notes. He can do the whole thing. And you'll see in here, he's a pretty good whistler as well. And you can just see the way that he addresses the conductor beforehand. Hey, mate, this is what we're doing. You ready to go? Let's go. That's the way Al Jolson was. But because it was Al Jolson, if you were an orchestra leader and you were getting to perform with him, that was pretty cool. So yeah. So I encourage you to look at this clip from a bygone era to see Al Jolson in all of his glory. And glory is an understatement for Al Jolson. Well, if you have come back for another video, you're trying to think, what on earth is this Al Jolson guy? Well, go and have a look and see what you think. And if it's your first time, welcome to the channel. It's fantastic that you are here. And if you've hung around to the end, thank you for doing so. Always the encouragement that if you do click on my videos, watch to the end, because there's some interesting stuff. Well, I suppose interesting is a word for you to decide about. Yeah, I always encourage you to hang around because we go through some interesting stuff, I'm thinking. Well, that's it for today. As I've already said, next time we're just going to continue on with the Al Jolson story, because he is one of the greats, particularly in the 30s, of what some other people have said about him. So until then, I'll catch you around.